Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to talk to you all guys about something that I'm very passionate about. And it was a real pleasure to talk with a very excellent team for this toolkit for BAPM. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so talking about human milk, which is more than just nutrition for preterm infants, and focusing largely on the science behind MBM. And those of you who don't know me, I'm Minesh Khashu. I'm a neonatologist at University Hospitals, Dorset. As we all know, prematurity is a big problem all over the world. About 15 million babies get born preterm, with about 1 million deaths annually. And even those babies who do survive, they have a high risk of significant long-term problems at individual, family, and societal level. I'm going to go through the evidence. There's very little time, so I'm going to largely focus on the key findings, and I'm largely doing signposting rather than discussing the evidence in detail. And in terms of maternal breast milk for preterm babies, there are obviously some basis on physiological plausibility. There are lab and animal studies. There are some observational studies, and then obviously RCTs and systematic reviews and meta-analyses. I hope in the future we will use other non-traditional or newer research methods such as big data and AI and machine learning in gathering some of this evidence as well. And if we look at maternal breast milk and preterms, there are some areas where there's clear evidence of benefit, for example, necrotizing enterocolitis. There are some areas where there is some benefit known like ROP and BPD, though we can say that the quality of evidence is variable. And there are some other areas where perhaps till now the evidence is inconclusive, or sometimes it might even be conflicting. And I'm definitely sure you all agree that there are many areas which we have not even researched at all. I'm just sharing this lovely infographic from the Human Milk Foundation. I think I'm just signposting to their website. And they here talk about the various components of human milk and how they help in improving the health of newborns. And a lovely infographic as part of the same work is this, which talks about tailor-made antibodies, which are not only important for term babies, in fact, more important for preterm babies as well. If we look at human breast milk, there are a large number of immunomodulating components in it. I'm not going to go into detail, but I will signpost to you to this excellent review, which has recently been published. And these are some of the things that give maternal breast milk the importance that we want people to understand and appreciate in terms of improving outcomes for preterm babies. And if you look at the schema, which basically elucidates how the different microbial factors, the different immunological factors, and the different metabolic factors within breast milk help to, one, nurture good bacteria in the gut, but at the same time also help counter some of the pathogens, how they minimize inflammatory processes, and how they improve gut health in the preterm infant. As we all know, one of the big components of breast milk that is important for initial infant gut health is human milk oligosaccharides. I don't have time to go into detail, but we know that HMOs can have a prebiotic function. They can have a decoy function, which is very important to counter pathogens. And they also provide fucose and sialic acid, which are quite important for host defense and neurodevelopment, respectively. And an important aspect is also glycosaminoglycans, which play a very important role in preventing bacterial invasion and translocation following inflammation in the gut. They suppress pro-inflammatory cytokines. So GAGs are quite important for the preterm infant and for the preterm infant's health. We also know that breast milk lipids are especially important to enhance neonatal intestinal development and protect against injury. Again, because of dearth of time, I'm not going to go into detail, but I have signposted the relevant article for you to look at. This again in nutrients highlights the various bioactive components in breast milk and roles in attenuating intestinal inflammation. And similarly, this is a list of different cytokines that preterm infants have a predisposition to have a very high inflammatory state, and breast milk, mother's breast milk, plays a big part in trying to suppress this inflammatory cascade and harm to the gut and general health of the preterm infant. If we wanted to look at specific conditions and breast milk for preterm infants, one of the big areas obviously is necrotizing enterocolitis, and these are the various components listed here which are known to improve protection against NEC. And I'm not going to again go into detail, but again, these all individual components complement each other in providing protection in different ways. Again, this good schema shows you how the various antibodies in breast milk, lactoferrin, HMOs, and various epidermal and other growth factors not only decrease inflammation, but if inflammation has already happened or there is a pathogen which is trying to get into a baby's system, there are ways in which these protective mechanisms can prevent significant dissemination of these enteric organisms, which we traditionally have seen in severe NEC. This meta-analysis by Miller et al. Was an important one because it showed significant reduction in NEC incidence in preterm babies because of maternal breast milk. It also suggested a reasonable reduction in late onset sepsis, in severe ROP as well. And any volume of human milk was better than exclusive preterm formula, and the higher the dose of preterm milk, the better the protection. So this was quite an important body of evidence for us to promote preterm breast milk use. Again, this is the forest plot. I don't want to go into detail showing the various studies. We also have some other studies which have shown benefit for neck protection with using breast milk, mother's own milk for preterm babies. And this is data from some of Lucas's work and the Donovan team, again showing that in preterm babies, use of MBM significantly improves or drops the risk for medical and surgical neck as well as mortality. And this is a relatively recent systemic review and meta-analysis that I wanted to share. Again, I'm not going to go into detail, but this covered 32 papers, out of which 6 were RCTs and 26 observational studies. And if you look at the various subgroups, we can see that there is definite reduction in neck risk with use of MBM in preterm babies. We then looked at another important condition in preterm babies, which is bronchopulmonary dysplasia or chronic lung disease of the neonatal domain. We can see through the systematic review that we are seeing some benefit in terms of mother's milk, especially if it's an exclusive diet. And I guess we will need more work on this, but definitely very promising for BPD risk as well. And there's another study again, which I'm highlighting here, as a systematic review and meta-analysis, looking at some favorable outcome in terms of BPD using MBM. Another important condition in preterm babies is ROP. And again, this systematic review and meta-analysis showed significant improvement in terms of severe ROP, as well as in terms of any stage ROP by the use of MBM in preterm babies. So we are seeing there's a body of evidence building showing why maternal breast milk is so important for preterm babies. It's also important to understand that some of the general benefits of breast milk, which are important for all gestation babies or term babies, are equally as important for preterm babies as well. We know that breast milk use overall gives a 12% reduction in infant mortality risk. It significantly decreases respiratory and gastrointestinal infections. But what is more important is to perhaps appreciate and share the fact that breast milk feeding duration has a dose effect. on improving outcomes, and also not just the duration, but the amount of breast milk received shows a dose response relationship. And in addition to some of the other advantages I've already alluded to, improvement in neurodevelopment is perhaps one of the big advantages of using breast milk in preterm babies. And I've here highlighted a couple of the relevant references. I don't have time to go into detail. And so, why should maternal breast milk be the primary enteral diet of preterm infants? I think we've partly already answered this, but it's largely because of a significant drop in the rate of NEC, ROP, late onset sepsis, fewer rehospitalizations in the first year of life, and definitely improved neurodevelopmental outcomes. So these are all short-term or medium-term things, but in terms of the long-term outcome, also there is a big advantage in terms of the risk of metabolic syndrome, later cardiac and health. And so for preterm babies, it is even doubly important that they receive MBM. Some of the references to some of the evidence I have alluded to so far. I think one of the other important areas that is relatively new is the understanding that breast milk and colostrum is a way of channeling mom's microbiome to the baby's microbiome, which might stay with the baby for life and can have a huge, massive impact on that preterm baby's life. This is again relatively new work, and I'm sure we will get more and more evidence in this domain in the coming years. Something also relatively newer is our appreciation that oropharyngeal colostrum can positively modulate inflammatory response in preterm neonates. And since we know that inflammation plays a big part in a lot of preterm neonatal morbidities, the use of oropharyngeal colostrum is becoming more and more important. And it is quite important to utilize it as a means of decreasing the pro-inflammatory state of the preterm neonate. We, however, need to be collecting evidence of benefit for this intervention more. We have some evidence, but I think we perhaps need more. And as I said, under 10 minutes, I'm not going to go into a lot of evidence or a lot of detail. We also need more perhaps evidence in terms of MBM improving feeding tolerance, in terms of it decreasing time to full enteral feeding, and also decreasing overall risk of allergy and atopy in the preterm infant. We also need to perhaps gather evidence on other aspects that might be important to families in terms of improved parental satisfaction, in terms of improving parent-infant bonding, as well as many more of the other outcomes that are relevant here, which I don't have time to go into detail. Also highlighting once again, it is important in terms of long-term health that preterm infants get maternal breast milk, especially if they are genetically or as for part of a family predisposed to some of the metabolic disorders of later life. A newer area again is the use of microRNAs, and we all know that breast milk is rich in microRNAs, and since microRNAs can play a very important role in the regulation of many biological and developmental processes, how the preterm breast milk impacts on this and on the health of the preterm infant needs much detailed study. I think one of the important things and one of the key messages I want to pass on to you guys today is that maternal breast milk for the preterm infant is quite personalized, and it is preterm specific because the anti-infective components are personalized based on mom's microbiome and pathogen profile. The protein content is preterm specific with especially important amino acids like valine, threonine, and arginine, which play a big part in gut and general infant health. We have a rich amount of secretory IgA and deficiency of leptin, which again is quite important. And with the use of colostrum in preterm infants, we can decrease inflammatory response and specifically improve the gut and overall health of the preterm infant. There's also an interesting finding of a single study, which again, we hope further work will be done on this, is that use of maternal breast milk is also, especially early use, is also seen to show a reduction in the incidence of spontaneous intestinal perforation, which again is an important condition in the preterm infant. This schema again shows that the preterm milk obviously has much more protein, and similarly the glycosaminoglycans, which are so important in the gut health, are much higher in the preterm infant, again giving us a flavor of how preterm breast milk is so different and so personalized to the preterm body use. As I alluded to you previously, I have been only given less than 10 minutes to cover this huge topic. So there's a lot of areas that I have not covered, including collection, storage, and safe handling of breast milk, which I think is quite important. I have not covered the nutritional quality and obviously fortification. And there are many other controversies and debates in these areas. I'll just signpost to you and into an interesting editorial on some of these aspects as listed there. If we now start thinking of looking ahead in terms of maternal breast milk for preterm infants, I think we definitely need to find ways to establish animal models that better reflect the preterm neonate, and also refinement of some of the humanoid model systems, which will help bridge the gap that we currently have between bench to bedside. We need newer bioinformatic tools to correlate the extensive array of metabolites and microbiota in preterm infants, and that might help us positively influence health of the preterm infant. And we need to perhaps better also understand how these metabolites differ functionally in the extremely preterm infant. We all know that the blood and metabolome and the lipidome of a breast milk fed infant is quite different from a non-breast milk fed infant. We also understand that breast milk, as we already discussed, has a degree of plasticity in its composition based on the physiology of the mother-baby dyad. So how this plasticity affects the physiology of the child, its growth trajectory and long-term development needs further study. I don't think we know enough of this yet. And this schema also highlights how the mother's physiology can have an impact on the preterm infant through human milk composition, and how we can use particular biomarkers and bioactivity to gather more evidence to study this better. I wouldn't be amiss if I said that the science of breast milk will likely open up new avenues of therapeutic options to minimize the adverse health consequences of prematurity. I think we're just beginning to understand the magic of breast milk. So I think there's more to come here. And we also perhaps need to improve methodologically and perhaps do bigger trials. And also perhaps use newer research methods like big data to help answer some of the many unanswered questions in this domain. We also perhaps need more work in terms of preterm breast milk and stem cells and what the impact is on the preterm health. Further work needs to be done on GAGs, on, as I said, microRNAs, on human milk-derived vesicles, as well as what the effect of the maternal microbiome and maternal diet and dietary supplements is on the composition of maternal breast milk, because this can have a huge impact on outcomes for the baby and the family. This is from our BAPM toolkit. I'm not going to go into detail because it's already in the toolkit, and this highlights some of the other data and evidence with respect to maternal breast milk. In summary, I think perhaps the best way to summarize the importance of maternal breast milk for preterm babies is that it is an exceptional example of both personalized and precision medicine. We have just, I guess, opened the cover of this book. There's a lot more to come. But based on what we already know, I think early colostrum use within 6 hours of birth and ensuring that MBM is the first enteral feed given to the baby is quite important, because it will seed the baby's gut with the right microbiome, which might stay with the baby for a long, long time and have a huge impact on the baby's health. We already have evidence that there's a decrease in mortality and morbidities with regard to maternal breast milk in preterm infants, but we need to continue strengthening that evidence. We also need to gather evidence of better understanding of improvements in long-term metabolic risk based on the Dohard premise. And last but not least, maternal breast milk is one of the most important public health interventions known to us. And it's quite important that we better quantify and appreciate the maternal, family, and societal benefits of maternal breast milk. And last but not the least, we need to focus much better as neonatal teams on colostrum. It's the best start to a preterm's life. It's like their first immunization, and it is truly liquid gold. Thank you very much for your kind attention.